If you're building and scaling a SaaS business, there's a myriad of SaaS metrics to look at. Honestly, it can be a little dizzying. In this video, though, I'm gonna be looking into one of my most favorite metrics. It's the LTV to CAC ratio. We're gonna go into exactly what it is, how do you parse it, and the one thing you can do to optimize it. Intro. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Unstoppable. I'm TK. On this channel, I bring an episode every single Sunday and every single Wednesday to help SaaS founders like you build, scale, and exit a SaaS business. So if you're new to our community, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell icon, because I bring an episode like this every single Sunday and Wednesday with the TK energy. Also, by the way, if you are at that stage of your SaaS business where you're building a go-to-market machine, I run a weekly training on how to build an unstoppable go-to-market machine. So be sure to follow the link below this video, and I'll share more details about that training at the end of this video as well. But first, let's dig into the LTV to CAC ratio. Here's the thing, there's no shortage of actual SaaS metrics to look at, and it can be fairly dizzying. But ultimately, when you get to the core of a SaaS business, there's two things to know. One, the reason SaaS businesses are so coveted, they command such high multiples, is because of their highly predictable nature in terms of revenues. Investors love that. Which means, two, if you have a SaaS business, there's really two things that matters the most. It's at what low of a cost you can acquire new customers, and it's how low you can actually keep your churn and actually increase that lifetime value. LTV and CAC ends up being two of the most important metrics when it comes to the health of a SaaS business. This is why the LTV, the lifetime value of the customer, to the customer acquisition cost, CAC ratio, is super, super powerful. Very quickly, you can start to understand the health of a SaaS business, and you can start to diagnose what might be going wrong with a stalled SaaS business if you're diagnosing it. Knowing everything that I know in my Tout app journey and in my Marketo journey, both very different scale SaaS businesses, we're gonna be digging into the LTV to CAC ratio. So if you're excited to dig in, smash that like button and let's get right into it. Okay, so step number one in this is, what is the LTV to CAC ratio? So the LTV is essentially your lifetime value of the customer, and the CAC is your customer acquisition cost. And the ratio of that can give some insights into how efficient you are in your SaaS business. So to calculate your LTV, what you want to look at is the average value of a customer, the average amount of money that your customer pays. You want to times that by your gross margins. That's essentially netting out the cost of servicing that customer, not acquiring the customer. And then you divide that by your revenue churn rate. A simpler way to think about this is if a customer actually comes in and pays you $1,000, and it turns out for that $1,000 that they're paying you for the year, it costs you $300 in server costs and whatever to actually service them, then you're actually getting $700 to that customer. Now, on average, if that customer stays for 3 years, then it's $700 times 3. That's $2,100 of LTV that you have for your customer. So that's your LTV. Your CAC is essentially how much you spent in your go-to-market divided by the number of net new customers you brought on in that period. Typically for your CAC, you look at the trailing 3 months, how much you spent on it, and you compare that to the number of new customers you got. That's your customer acquisition cost. All right? So when you have your LTV divided by CAC, you get this ratio. That's your LTV to CAC ratio. LTV and CAC are two of the most important metrics that you need to start monitoring once you have some semblance of a SaaS business, and more importantly, when you have a SaaS business that you're looking to grow. This gives you an insight into what's working and what's not in your SaaS business. Now, if you have a problem with the formula that I gave, you probably do. Here's the thing. There are a million different nuances on how LTV is calculated, how CAC is calculated, and the nuances around that, and can vary depending on the sophistication level and the stage and the specific type of SaaS business that you have. So with that said, what I wanted to do was just give you the gist of what the LTV to CAC is, so we can have the broader discussion on what exactly to do with that ratio. So you can follow this formula, and if you don't like it, you can do your own. What's more important is you get to this ratio. Once you get to this ratio, that's when the fun begins. Essentially, you'll get a number that's essentially the ratio, and it gives you a view into how efficient your go-to-market is. When you start to look at this, if you have a 1x ratio, you are squarely in the bad zone. Essentially what that means is you're spending more money to acquire customers and they're not paying you much. You're not even making back that customer acquisition cost in the lifetime of the customer that you're gonna keep them. So if you're at 1x, you're likely bad. You need to actually stop the brakes and figure out what's going on. If you are at 3x, that is what's considered good. There are some VCs that disagree now, but by and large, it's agreed that a 3x LTV to CAC ratio is considered good. It means that you're actually spending a reasonable amount of money on your customer acquisition cost and your lifetime value is much higher, and therefore there is money to be made and a profitable business to be grown. If you are much higher than 3x, let's just say you're at 5x or 7x, or you're just crushing it at 10x, whatever it may be, then it's not necessarily good. What that means is that you are under investing in sales and marketing. It means that for some reason you figured out a formula to acquire customers and keep them for a very long time and have them pay for a very long time, but you're not taking enough of that money, enough of those proceeds, and putting it back into sales and marketing so you can grow faster. So net, if you're at 1x, it means that you've got a bad, inefficient model. If you're at 3x, it means you're pretty good. And if you are at 5x, that means that you can probably invest more in sales and marketing. So once you actually figure out your LTV and your CAC, and you compare the ratio on that, you can start to understand where your SaaS business sits in terms of the health of the business. Now, there are a million other SaaS metrics out there that you can look at, but this one I like because it gives you a very quick insight into where you are in the business. Particularly in investment conversations, when you start to dig into the LTV to the CAC ratio and you get to have a discussion with the founder, you start to understand how dialed in the founder is into the go-to-market motion, into the churn metrics, into the product metrics. You can have a really insightful conversation about the SaaS business. So in itself, it's actually a very powerful metric to look at. Now, before I go into the third piece, which is what do you actually do with this number and how do you diagnose and what do you do to improve it, let me just pause here for a second. Can I just get a yes in the comments below if you're starting to get some aha moments by thinking about your LTV to CAC ratio? Also, by the way, if you want to dig deeper into this, I run a weekly training on how to actually run a more efficient go-to-market strategy for your SaaS business. Be sure to follow the link below and I'll tell you more about it at the end of the video. But let's dig into step number 3. I believe that for any SaaS business, there's actually 3 core pillars. There's your market, there's your product, and there's your go-to-market. You need to actually optimize for all 3 of these. A lot of SaaS founders tend to over-index for the product part of their strategy instead of looking at their market strategy and their go-to-market strategy. One of the reasons I love the LTV to CAC ratio is because it forces you to really think about all 3 of these. Let me explain. When you start to understand, let's just say you're at 1x, right? You're at 1x, you're at bad, or your growth is stalled in your SaaS business. You want to start digging into, well, what do I do about this, right? Ultimately, as a founder, you'll have to figure out which part of the equation you need to focus on. You either have a churn problem or you have a go-to-market problem. The churn problem means people are coming in, and maybe you have both, but you want to first solve any churn issues first. When you start to look at churn, you'll start to understand, well, is the product just bad? Meaning people come in, they love the idea of the product, but your implementation of the product, it's too buggy, it's too problematic. It overpromises what it does, but it doesn't quite deliver. Then you need to go double down on actually fixing churn. Now, a lot of times what ends up happening is you don't have a broad product problem, but you might have a churn problem still because of competitive dynamics. Maybe your pricing is wrong. Maybe someone else is giving it for way cheaper and your customers just don't want to pay that much. Or even more importantly, maybe you have an ideal customer problem, meaning a certain subset of customers love the product while others hate the product, and you're getting all of them in. And at the end of the day, the broader churn number looks bad, but if you actually were to zoom in on a specific type of customer, maybe the churn numbers aren't that bad, which means that maybe you don't have a churn problem, but you have a go-to-market problem. So the first order of business is to actually figure out if you have an LTV problem, a churn problem, and to look at competition, product, and maybe the ICP. Once you've figured out if you're like, you know what, my product's solid. There's a core group of users that absolutely love it. They don't have a pricing problem. We differentiate from our competitors, but our churn is still bad. Then you can start to look at, well, how do we get in more of the right type of customers, right? And you maybe don't have a churn problem. You actually just have a disguised go-to-market problem. Now, on the other hand, your LTV might just be fine. By the time they come in, they're great, but you spent way too much money on acquiring those customers. Then you actually have a CAC problem. You actually have a go-to-market machine problem. In that case, you need to look at messaging. You need to look at your ideal customer profile. You need to look at your audience. Are you building an audience? You need to look at, are you doing inbound? Are you doing outbound? Or are you just wasting a bunch of money on ads? What you need to start thinking about more is your market and go-to-market strategy versus just your product strategy. This is why the LTV to CAC ratio is so friggin' powerful. It forces you to really diagnose where the levers are, where the gears are getting stuck in your SaaS business. See, I look at every SaaS business, it's a machine. And what you want to do is be able to just visualize the machine and start to understand where things are getting stuck. And when you start to look at this ratio, you can start to get some insights into where you need to focus. Now you know how to actually diagnose your SaaS business using this magical metric called the LTV to CAC ratio. You also know whether you have a churn problem in your hand, a product problem, or you have more of a market and go-to-market problem. Ultimately, for any SaaS business, the name of the game is to figure out an efficient go-to-market machine. That is the thing that solves a hell of a lot of problems, because if you have an efficient go-to-market machine, you'll attract the right people, and those people will help you build the right product, guide your roadmap, and stay forever. And that's what makes for a really successful SaaS business. So now you know how to think about the LTV to CAC ratio, but you may not know how to actually build an efficient go-to-market machine. This is the big thing that I focus on. I spend my day and night on. I work with SaaS founders like you to build an efficient and unstoppable sales and marketing go-to-market machine. So if you're interested in that, I run a training every single week. So follow the link below or go to tkkader.com/SaaS-training. And over there, you'll be able to access a 45-minute training where I go into exactly how to build an unstoppable sales and marketing machine for your SaaS business. And that way, you can start to actually think about lowering your customer acquisition cost, and you can start to think holistically about building your startup across product, market, and go-to-market. If you got value from this video, please be sure to smash that like button. It'll mean the world to me and my team. We put a lot of effort into these videos. Also, if you have a fellow founder who is also trying to scale their SaaS business and get it right, be sure to share this video with them. If you're part of a Slack group or a mailing list, please share this video over there as well. It would mean the world to us. And lastly, we bring you an episode every Sunday and every Wednesday. So if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and that bell icon so you get notified every single time I bring you a video on how to build, scale, and exit a SaaS business. And lastly, remember, everyone needs a strategy in their life and their business. But when you are with us, yours is gonna be unstoppable. I'm TK, and I will see you in the next video.